answer.
Another thing that people always say is that people who really need communications are salespeople. Generally, the rest of us are not trying to sell. Is that true, or do salespeople generally need it more, or it's important for everyone?
You know, salespeople talk a lot for a living, and their livelihood is based on it. So of course we do a lot of work with sales professionals, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to be selling specific. Now, you know, if I'm working in research and development, or if I'm a scientist, I'm not trying to sell for my livelihood. I might be trying to sell an idea, but the way to look at it is that in any given presentation, there are different roles that we're in throughout the presentation. I may be in the role of selling at one point. I might be in the role of teaching at another point, or in the role of persuading. Professional politicians, for instance, are often persuading and influencing, and sometimes selling, right? So when you look at how you do that, like let's say in the United States, if you're in a presidential campaign, you're looking at how do I match the delivery of my speech with the substance of it so that I'm effectively getting that message through, whether I'm selling it or influencing or persuading.
And speaking of presidents, why is President Obama so effective as a communicator?
You think he's effective?
I don't know. I mean,
I'm
it
just
seems
kidding.
to be.
Joking.
You're more effective, right?
No, I'm joking. He's an effective communicator because he has a style that is sincere and comes across as credible. Now, in a formal presentation, he is able to change the dynamic range in his communication. And you can see this in many of his speeches. Now, long-form speeches, he has a harder time with this. But short, except for on the campaign, because it's well practiced. President Clinton also had a very effective style. Now, George Bush didn't at first. Towards the end of his career, got better at it in short form. But it's, you know, they're very good at matching what they're saying with the way they're saying it.
When you talk a little bit about the presidents in the US, you've been traveling around Asia quite a bit. What's your take on the communication styles of leaders in Asia? And, you know, what are some things Asian leaders need to be conscious of and maybe possibly improve on?
You know, a lot of the challenge that we see with Asian speakers, celebrities and politicians, is that the style of speech doesn't change very much. So their messages may be profound, but the way they are communicated are fairly what we call mono-pattern, not monotone. Monotone would sound kind of like a robot, like a mono-pattern, where it doesn't change very much. And as a result, the sound waves become somewhat hypnotic to listeners, and it can lull them into a trance, making it harder to actually focus on what's being said. So what they can do, what those speakers can do, is as they look at their speech, identify what are the emotional components in that speech, and then try and match that with their delivery. They may need to record themselves and play it back to get a sense of how to actually do that.
What if I'm a young grad, I've just graduated from college or university, and I'm out in the workplace? You know, what's one big communication tip you'd give me?
Oh, to a young grad, a great communication tip is listen. Learn how to listen effectively. It's not easy. Often when we are listening, we're listening from our own perspective as to how does what you say affect me. When you're able to listen from the other person's perspective, which is a higher level, it's much easier for you to gain understanding of what the person's saying, and therefore you can craft a stronger response. You'll be a stronger communicator, which will affect you at a job interview, at a raise discussion, for a performance review, across the board.
Another thing that seems to be interesting, we find, is that, you know, when you compare Americans, Europeans, and Asians, somehow the American business leaders seem to articulate things a lot more savvy in terms of their communication versus the Europeans and somewhat the Asians. Why do you think there's a reason for that, or just culturally?
It could be a cultural thing and comfort with English. You know, growing up with it, Americans don't tend to learn more than one language, maybe Spanish for the most part, I mean in the general sense, whereas a lot of other countries you're learning 3 languages or maybe 4 languages, and so there's more time for Americans to become familiar with metaphors and stories that can be woven in, which is a great technique. If somebody who wants to learn how to do that, start looking for different metaphors that you can bring into your business examples. Okay.
Let's end with one question. Give us one big coaching or one big coaching tip and one big communication tip.
Sure. Okay. Well, the most important communication tip is to remember that it's not about you. It never is. And that's important. It sounds simple, but it's important. You already know why, as we say back in Boston, why you're wicked smart. You know, I mean, you know what's in your head. You know what you want to say. We learn techniques like Aristotle's patterns of reasoning and persuasion and organization tools. a lot of the things we put in the book, we learn these techniques because we want someone else to get our message. And so if you use that as a starting point, you're going to do just fine.
Okay, fantastic. Ethan, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We have Ethan Becker here at our studios at Manara Star.